Coaches Take on Work is a community of coaches sharing our perspectives on work today. Come for the spicy takes and stay for the quick tools and tips. Find everything from best practices in management and leadership to our thoughts on trending topics in work and some fun things you may not be expecting.
Well, I want to acknowledge you for taking a lunch break. Be the leader that you tell everyone else to be.
Oh, I normally always take lunch break, like very diligently, but I offered a noon spot on my calendar. So can't say I always do if I had a weakness. So what I do when I book over my lunch is I just move my lunch. So I always still have a lunch break. That's what I messed up. I forgot to move my lunch block. So let's learn.
It all worked out also. Sometimes the universe just works.
Yes, the universe is like, Chelsea needs to eat lunch or she gets hangry.
Coach Chelsea in the afternoon hangry is probably not the best. So
not ideal.
All right, well, we'll get us started. Welcome, everyone. I'm looking forward to talking about delegation today. As a quick introduction, my name is Jaclyn Cook, and I'm the founder of Jaclyn Cook Coaching, where as a certified coach, I focus on leadership, productivity, and personal finance. And really the heart of my coaching is to use the power of coaching to help people increase their confidence and really have an impact in and out of work. And kind of like I alluded to, but delegation is just one of those topics and skills that's really challenging and yet so powerful to practice, and when executed well can really set leaders apart from others, honestly. So Chelsea, let's pass over to you. Love to hear a little bit about you and why do you like delegation?
Yeah. My name is Chelsea Seid. I'm the founder and chief coach and consultant of Talent Praxis, where I help companies and leaders turn their ideas into actions to achieve their goals. And I work with team of coaches, providing one-on-one coaching and custom coaching programs for companies. And delegation is probably one of the most frequent topics I discuss, second to, I know I've said that about feedback and prioritization and communication. So second to those, but still a very common topic, because it's one of the most important things when we think about leading and managing a team. We'll talk more about what that means, but really if you're delegating and distributing work correctly, you're able to achieve your goals as an organization. So I think this is one of our core topics.
I think you make a good point. As a leader has more and more teams or more and more team members, it becomes much more critical to be working on this skill as well. So let's continue to elaborate on what delegation actually means.
Yeah. So I would define delegation as transferring projects, responsibilities, workloads, decision-making, authority, leadership, really transferring any sort of responsibility to others. And another way you could think about it is kind of what I was alluding to earlier. So delegation is distributing workloads, distributing work. And when you are managing or leading a team of people, it is really your job to determine the best way to distribute the work where everyone on your team stays motivated, they stay engaged, and you're getting the work done as efficiently and productively as possible. And so delegation is kind of the core of what you're doing as a manager or a leader. So if you're listening to this and you're like, I'm listening to this because I need to delegate more, great. Like that should probably be one of your number one focuses, is how effectively am I distributing work amongst my team members to allow us to achieve our goals.
I'd add one thing too is thinking about from the manager's perspective as well is what do they exceptionally do well that they want to keep, which we'll get into a strategy for thinking about that too. But there's two sides of that coin here, is what does the manager or leader need to keep because that is their superpower, that is the area they're going to be motivated, and then what does the team need to be having distributed to them as well.
I love that, getting into the people side of it, where are your strengths and superpowers.
Yeah.
So you mentioned strategies. Jaclyn, what are the tools you use in delegation?
Yeah, I want to talk about two different tools. So the first one is the consequence conviction matrix. So this was presented by Keith Raboy in Sam Altman's How to Start a Startup lecture series at Stanford. And here we consider your conviction behind a certain task, and the consequences of that task when you're thinking about how you're going to delegate. And so also one thing of it as, and if you see this out around, it looks like quadrants, but it's really like a continuum up and down the line of how much you're going to monitor on a task or what your conviction is on a task. The second one is the task relevant maturity model. So this one was coined by Adam Grove in his book, High Output Management. And here it actually is considering kind of like situational leadership in that it's the, if you're familiar with that topic, but skill and the will of a team member, and then the urgency and importance of the work. And then that will help inform what you delegate, how much you manage. Again, on a continuum in that people's skills and wills change for a certain task, urgency and importance change based on the task at hand as well. So the crux of it though, if we just simplify it down, is that you want to delegate you need to determine if you want to delegate the work to others or do it yourself. That's ultimately what you're deciding. And then you're deciding, do I monitor this? Which we're going to get into that because I know that kind of can be undefined, but are we monitoring the progress or are we delegating it fully? And that again will depend on most likely the skill and the will of the individual as well. So take that as a high level. Chelsea, break that down, unless you have anything to add, but like break that down of how do we actually apply kind of just like an academic framework in that way.
Yeah. And I'm glad you highlighted those too. So we'll link them and you can read into them in more detail. But we always like to start with like, where does this come from? Like, what's the science? What's the academia behind it? But Jaclyn mentioned it's a continuum. So what I recommend is starting with asking yourself 3 questions. So what is the skill and the will of my team members? How skilled or capable are they to do this work at hand that I need to distribute? How willing or motivated are they to do this work at hand? If you remember back to our situational leadership podcast, we talked about that a lot. What is your conviction for the work? So how important is this to you? How valuable is this to you? How much do you care exactly how this work gets done and exactly the way that it's implemented and executed? And you should be realistic as a leader in this type of question. And then lastly, what is the risk of the work or what is its relative importance or urgency? If this is the most important, urgent, risky work that you're doing as a team, that's really going to impact who you're going to delegate it to and how much you're going to be monitoring or caring about it. From there, to actually begin, I would encourage you to answer these 3 questions. And then as Jaclyn shared, the first thing you're going to say is, okay, based on those, is this something I need to do myself or is this something I need to delegate? And so the first step in this continuum really is do it myself or delegate. If you're doing it yourself, you're stopping there. If you're delegating, now you're on the sort of continuum of how much do you monitor? How involved are you versus delegating it fully and giving away full autonomy to the team member. So the less skilled or willed a team member is, the higher risk or the higher importance of the work, the more you're doing it with them and monitoring the process. So another way to say this is sort of developmental delegation, but this is where we're not just, here's a project, good luck, right? We're probably involved, we're checking in more. Maybe this is more frequent one-on-ones. Maybe you're actually pairing or shadowing and doing the work together. Maybe it's regular daily or weekly reporting on progress where they're letting you know how things are going, right? So any form of monitoring that suits the skill level of the team member, how willing and motivated they are to do the work, how important and impactful the work is, how risky it is. Like, is this your most sensitive client? Right. And then also how urgent it is. If this is something with a tight timeline, you're probably going to set smaller micro timelines to check in to make sure you meet that tight timeline at the end. So this is where the continuum comes in, is how much are you monitoring? How much are you participating with them? And at the very end of that spectrum, that's full delegation. This is a highly skilled team member who knows what they're doing, and you can leave them fully autonomous to do it themselves. And so those are really the decisions you're making as a manager.
I think we say this in a lot of our podcasts because there's so much intentionality and like mindfulness that goes into managing and leading, but I'm going to say it again. And so this idea behind everything Chelsea just called out does also ask that a leader is self-aware. So really thinking about, okay, why or what is your conviction behind this and why? I mean, you made an example, it's his most sensitive client. What is the risk to that? but being mindful about those things, because I guess what we're really saying is not everything can be high risk, high conviction. And if it is, then maybe that's a bigger conversation, but truly being honest with what is. I mean, we talked about in a recent episode, the Eisenhower principle, and really thinking about urgency and importance and naming and defining those things, because not everything can be the highest priority either. And so this is an opportunity to kind of work on that skill, answer the questions Chelsea's called out, but be mindful about what you're choosing in those answers and why. Because then you can start to monitor, if you are able to recognize where this could be delegated, and do it in a way that's thoughtful, so you avoid the ever scary word, dirty word, micromanagement. All right, so let's look at the other side that I think some managers just want to avoid. So when they delegate, they might delegate completely, like Chelsea highlighted, but it's inappropriate. Like they're not skilled, they're not willed for that. Like you're setting everyone up for failure. And so just really thinking about, what does it look like to monitor? What does it mean to set clear expectations? Like you said, like the when we check in, the how we check in, what we're checking in on, because that sets everyone up for success. You feel successful, you feel confident, they feel successful, they know what's expected of them, they know how to step into that space. And I guess what we're saying too is a highly skilled, like a litmus test maybe, as a highly skilled individual will show you, they'll be communicating up, they'll be anticipating the needs, the questions. The idea of monitoring, it becomes almost their monitoring by sharing with you. And so just paying attention to your team as individuals can be really powerful here. If this feels foreign to you, I do recommend going back to situational leadership and checking that out too, to like really get an idea of how we determine the skill and the will of our team members too. So, all right, I'll get off my high horse on that one.
I love that.
Actually, unless you have anything to add.
I love that. The only thing I would add, and I hope you all take this away from what Jaclyn just shared, if you're not delegating enough, like if you know you need to delegate more, we kind of see two buckets of people, and neither bucket is bad. It's just something to be aware of so you know how to adjust. So are you in the bucket of you're a little too over controlling here, right? Like too much of your work you have strong conviction around, too much of your work you consider high risk, or you're really not giving your teams the benefit of the doubt when you think about their capability and their skill, right? So you're not delegating because you're like, I just can't do it the way I can. And that's okay. Draw awareness to that. Still self-love around that. That's fine. All right, I'm aware of it. Now I can solve the problem. Alternatively, you're too afraid of micromanaging. So you're doing what Jaclyn shared, where it's like, here, do it, take it, good luck. And they're not skilled enough. They need more monitoring, right? Like they need more check-ins. They need more regular engagement on the project because it's brand new to them, and that's okay. Or even if it's not brand new to them, it's a highly sensitive project within the organization and you want to set them up for success. So what category do you fall in not delegating enough? And then from there, you can kind of figure out how to get closer to the middle. And it likely involves monitoring a little bit more, or maybe monitoring a little bit less. And in either of those, as she shared, go back to situational leadership, which we shared in a later podcast or earlier podcast. And situational leadership is kind of a key for how you monitor and in what stage are you monitoring. So it's really a guide for that, which is nice. But Jaclyn, you referenced earlier the individual, and so I'd love you to speak a little bit more about that. How should leaders consider their team members' goals in delegation?
I think that's the best part. I think you said even developmental delegation earlier. And that's a key phrase here, because I think this is one of the secrets, the like undiscovered secrets of delegation, honestly, in that delegation actually is an opportunity to level up our team members. So when we're thinking about delegating, ensure that you are aligned with your team members on what are their career goals? What are they motivated by? What do they really enjoy? And that can help also inform what you're delegating to them. I think the worst thing to be is that you're grooming a new manager or, a team member to be a manager, and they don't even want to manage. Like we're setting everyone up for failure there. But the flip side, if they are, like, that's a great opportunity to be delegating work, monitoring them, helping them grow so that succession planning is seamless. And they're also really motivated because they see where they're growing. So I think that's the other thing I see with managers is maybe not delegating enough, because they don't see it as actually giving up those responsibilities helps team members actually grow and flourish and expand their roles within the company. So that's at least how I see the team members fitting into that. let's talk about what effective delegation looks like. I feel like we alluded to it a little bit, but how would you further expound on what effective delegation looks like?
Yeah. If you are delegating effectively, we're really going to see a few outcomes. So the first is that you have time to focus on your most important work. So when you think about an average week, an average month, but like really an average week as a leader, you can say, I spent the correct amount of time focusing on my most important work. And I'm leaving that kind of vague because you can customize it, right? Depending on your role, depending on what you need to do. I don't know how much time that is, but you feel that your time is focused in the right places that move the needle for your team. The other is that your skilled team members, especially your most skilled team members, feel trusted and feel that they can work autonomously. Autonomy is a key intrinsic motivator. And so we want our most skilled team members, we want our MVPs, our most valuable players, to feel autonomous, to feel like you trust them, to feel like they know they can get the work done. And your less skilled team members, or your team members that need to develop their skill sets more or a bit more junior, they have opportunities to develop and grow. A lot of what Jaclyn was just sharing, right? And so they have opportunity because they're trying new things, they're learning new projects, they're really developing in their role, they're developing within your department. So that's kind of the first category. The next is, a little bit more of a personal feeling, I'd say, as a leader, but your conviction, the work that you're convicted around, or the work that has higher consequences for your team, is well communicated amongst your team, and you feel really comfortable about it. So if you're saying like, this is just my project right now, like I'm just really jazzed about this, I care a lot about it, it matters a ton, and it involves our highest profile client, you're not walking away with anxiety. You're not walking away concerned in how the project is doing. You feel really confident that you have the correct monitoring set up, you have the awesome lines of communication set up, and you have the right people on their work, right? For your team members, the feeling is that it's a safe space to take risks and make mistakes, right? They can try something new, they can explore. And so if you are getting feedback that safe space doesn't exist, I'd probably look at some challenges you're having in how you're delegating or distributing work and responsibilities. And lastly, monitoring and reporting is a valuable tool for you as a leader and for your team members, meaning there's solid communication amongst your team. There's really strong lines of sharing information. And as Jaclyn said, the most skilled team members are also excellent communicators. They're excellent at reporting. They're excellent at anticipating needs. One of my favorite things when working with clients or working with senior leadership is really not having them ask me questions, because I'm always anticipating the questions they're going to ask before they do, right? I'm able to deliver that information before they need it. And that's what a really highly skilled team member looks like. So you don't have to monitor them. You don't have to set up reporting with them. Let's say you fully delegate to them and they report to you when you need it, because they're anticipating that need. And that's a hard skill, right? But that's what we're saying when you're at that really high skill level. So monitoring and reporting should feel like a valuable tool to you. It should allow you to communicate with your leadership team, your manager. It should allow you to see how aligned your team is and how well it's progressing easily. And if you feel like, oh, I've delegated all this work and I have no idea what's going on in my team, first, be self-aware. Like, do you actually need to know as much as you want to know? But then second, consider how you're delegating, and maybe there is space to monitor more, to create better reporting cycles, to really brainstorm and collaborate with your team on how they'd like to do that. So effective delegation and knowing when it's effective is probably where we make this complicated. Hopefully we've presented something that's reasonably simple, but in the end, if it doesn't feel like what I just described, there's probably space for improvement or space for growth.
I might add just one piece to that also from a full team levels. You might see motivation increase or morale increase. Like if people are tasked with their best work, which isn't only in delegation, I understand that, but a output could also just start to show up as the way they're engaged as a team. I think the safe space is a perfect example of that as well. They feel like they're safe to test things, to challenge, to push the envelope. But you might also just be checking for how motivated is my team? How well are they engaged?
Yeah, about that. Back to the individuals.
Is that my thing?
Yeah, you're keeping us grounded today. I love it. These are people we're talking about, right? Not resources. It's wonderful. So what takeaway, if you could pick one, I know we've covered a lot in this podcast, it's like very dense. But what's one takeaway you want people to have from this?
So delegation is not a dirty word, but it's actually a really powerful skill that takes time and practice, but when done thoughtfully, intentionally, is an active approach for leaders to help ensure they thrive, their team goals get met, their team's thriving. It's just a really powerful lever to be pulling on. So I'd say practice it and be patient with yourself. Like Chelsea said, kind of be self-aware of what is really happening, what you're really convicted by. If you're on that continuum of control, these are more than one task, a takeaway now, but on that continuum of control or micromanagement, just be really thoughtful. But just keep practicing. I always want to encourage people to just keep practicing. These things take reps, and you aren't going to get it perfect the first time. How about you, Chelsea?
I'll follow that theme. Monitoring is not micromanagement. And monitoring can be done in collaboration with your team members. A strong team has a strong line of communication and strong information sharing. And that often looks like strong reporting and strong monitoring of work. And that doesn't mean you're a micromanager. And so I would encourage you to sort of move on from the micromanagement label and instead work in collaboration with your team members to figure out what good information sharing looks like on your team, what strong communication looks like on your team. And from there, that will naturally progress into strong monitoring and reporting of the most important work. So,
Couldn't agree more.
well, I hope you all find one new thing to delegate following this. Or
It's a challenge.
you need to let go of a little, right? See you next time. Bye, everybody.
If you enjoyed this episode, subscribe to Coaches Take on Work through your favorite streaming service so you don't miss a future episode. We are Coaches Take on Work, and for this episode's hot take,
Just paying attention to your team as individuals can be really powerful here. If this feels foreign to you, I do recommend going back to situational leadership and checking that out too, to like really get an idea of how we determine the skill and the will of our team members too. So